It is my pleasure to welcome Lorrie Robbins and Betty Ann Morgan for this second session. Lorrie comes to you with over 20 years of life cycle research administration experience. She has been fortunate enough to be part of research communities at 3 institutions of higher education. Lorrie's experience and knowledge has been gained at the central and departmental levels, giving her a wealth of knowledge. Lorrie is currently with the Duke Human Vaccine Institute. She is a member of NICHR, SRAI, NCMA, and other research communities where she keeps her skills and knowledge relevant. Lorrie carries the credentials of CRA and takes that role seriously as a research professional. She is published with a colleague in professional research administration journals, and Lorrie enjoys sharing her experiences with you, learning from the research admin community, and loves helping make research happen. Betty Ann Morgan is a grants and contracts manager at Duke University's campus grants management team. She is a certified research administrator with over 20 years of life cycle award management at both the department and central office locations. She is also a member of NICHR and SRAI and enjoys presenting and sharing her research knowledge and skills. Betty and a colleague are published in research administration journals, and she is passionate about the research administration profession. It is my pleasure again to welcome Betty and Lorrie. Please remember this session will be recorded. Please put all your questions in the chat box and they will be answered at the end of the presentation.
Thanks, Lynn, for that warm welcome. Hey, Betty, how are you?
Hey, Lorrie, how are you?
Hey, everybody. Hey, FRAC community. It's so good to see you. We wish we were there in person with you. I think I'm supposed to share my screen now, right? Right? Yeah. Okay.
So just in case there's any questions, Lorrie and I have worked together for a long, long time. She's that colleague that I'm published with, and I'm that colleague that she's published with. And we are long time FRAC enthusiasts. We have been doing this conference for several years. We love it, and we're so appreciative to be back in FRAC land again. Great to see everybody. Hope everybody's
okay.
well.
Yeah, just some housekeeping things. We'll ask you to respond to some of the things that we do up in chat, and we'll monitor the chat. Make sure you respond to everyone, because Betty and I believe that we learn from each other. And so we'd love to hear your responses. We will save all questions to a Q&A period at the end. So we do hope you join us for that. I am now moved over to CGMT, the Campus Grants Management Team, and no longer with DHVI, but still at Duke. And so it's hard to keep up with me. So we'll go ahead and get started.
Okay, I'm going to start off with, of course, just a few objectives. So besides having a lot of fun, collaborating again with everybody, just being together as in person as possible, we wanted to talk a little bit of pre-award. So just to get another housekeeping thing off the table, if you've never been with Lorrie and I before, you're going to figure out very quickly that I'm a Southerner and she's not. And so you have to deal with that. And I'm so sorry, but I will guarantee you, and I say this every single time, that by the end of our presentation, she will be talking just like me. So what are our objectives today? So again, we wanted to stroll into the pre-award side today. So we're going to talk about some sponsors. Are they the same? Are they different? Should they scare us? Funding announcements, same thing. Is one like the other? What are the differences? What are the similarities? We're going to get past these fears. Most of us that have as many years in business as Lorrie and I, and Lorrie, this makes us old. You probably started off back in the day, either on the pre-award side or the post-award side. Now, in recent years, a lot of us, I can speak for Lorrie and myself, as we're building our teams here at Duke, we are bringing in people to do life cycles. So by that used to be cradle to grave, but let's be a little positive. It's life cycle. So we're going to face our fears and get out of them. We're going to go back to the basics. Let's move it to the Ina Garden, aka Food Network star. She likes to go back to the basics for her recipes. We're going to go back to the basics so we can make forward progress. Best approaches in the pre-award process. Let's walk through some of those. And we'd love to hear from some of yours, maybe at the end.
So Betty says old, and I prefer to use the word seasoned. We are seasoned. We're not dinosaurs. We are seasoned. By the time Betty and I have danced for you,
yes.
We've shared our super research administrator capes with you.
Yes.
Now we're going to sing, and this is being recorded. So I'm going to make a fool of myself. But by the time that I'm done attempting to sing, I want you to, when I say 1, 2, 3, go, name that song and where it's from. So here we go. Are you ready? Betty, I won't make you sing. Okay.
Thank you.
One of these things is not like the other. One of these things just doesn't belong. Can you tell me which thing is not like the other by the time I finish my song? 1, 2, 3. Here's the second verse. Betty won't sing it, but 1, 2, 3, go. Name that song. Put it up in chat.
Here we go.
Nobody knows? Oh, yeah, there it is. All right. Sesame Street. Okay. There is a method to our madness here with Sesame Street. And when we start talking about sponsors and pre-award, and one thing is not like the other, but is it? We have to kick it back to the basics. We have to kick it backward to move it forward. Backward Sesame Street is way backward for me. But that's the method to our madness here, is that we're going to show you that maybe they look a little different, but maybe they're not so different, and maybe they do belong together, and maybe they don't.
So let's just talk through some of those initial common fears of pre-award, especially if you started off, you were hired into a post-award or into like a financial analyst position, and you're moved into research admin. The first fear, it's just too hard, it's too much, too many moving pieces. I don't have federal experience. If I don't have federal experience, how in the world will I ever get through pre-award? I don't have NIH. I don't have fill in the blank, DOD. I don't have NASA. I don't have Carnegie Mellon. I don't have Robert Wood Johnson Foundation experience. So how can I even begin? I don't know how to use ERA Commons. I don't know how to use grants.gov. I don't know how to use Inspires. Those are submission portals. And listen, I was hired to do post-award. I trained in post-award. I've been doing post-award. I consider myself quite good at it. So I can't learn pre-award. I just can't. And really, if you think PIs are hard to work with on a post-award side, wait till you're on a deadline. And speaking of, multiple deadlines rolling at you all at the same time. In the pre-award arena, do you get, oh, here's a PI that wants to do an NIH and the deadline is March 1st. Is that the only one you have until March 1st? I doubt it. Too many deadlines to juggle. And oh my God, how can I even think about life cycle when all I know is post-award? You're telling me to learn pre-award, I'm going to lose all of my post-award.
So let's actually take a look at some of the similarities between pre and post award. And I'm not talking process. I'm talking some of the same things. We have to communicate, right? We communicate in pre-award. We communicate in post-award. We communicate with all audiences. Communication on both sides. Data collection and entry. We're collecting data on the pre-award side. We're also collecting data on the post-award side. Hopefully we are. And we're entering data all over the place, right? Okay, same thing, reporting. We are reporting on the pre-award side. We may not be doing the reporting, but somebody's doing the reporting. We're doing it at the department level. They want to know how many grant submissions. They're doing it from the central level, overall how many grant submissions, but we're doing reporting on the post-award side. All those sponsored reports that are due, we're reporting to the PI, hopefully on a monthly basis. Same thing, reporting all over the place. Internal approvals. Our pre-award is going through the internal approval process on multiple levels. We also have the internal approvals on the post-award side at multiple levels. So are we seeing a theme here? Internal document routing. Pre-award side, we're reviewing those documents, internally routing for submission, internally routing documents on the post-award side. Protecting intellectual property. That's on the pre-award side. If we're looking at the sponsor funding announcements, is there anything in there on intellectual property? Post-award side, totally on the post-award side when the research is being done. Intellectual property on both sides. Publication rights, that's a big one, but most people don't understand that that is an export control thing. If we see that language in the funding announcement about not being able to publish, can your university accept that? On the post-award side, is it restricting their right to publish? So both sides, pre and post. Compliance, we got compliance all over the place, and everything that we do from start to finish life cycle, it's all about compliance. Research integrity on the post-award side, that they are completing that research in a manner that in high integrity. And pre-award, hopefully when they're writing that proposal, they're using accurate data. They're using accurate resources to write that proposal. So you got research integrity on both sides. The administrative burden, that is why we're here. As research administrative professionals, it is our responsibility to relieve that administrative burden for the PI, to help them get their science done. So whatever I can do to get that proposal out the door to relieve that burden, and anything I can do on the award side to relieve them so that they can get that science done. So there's administrative burden on both sides that we're helping to alleviate.
Okay, take a stretch if you need to, get a sip of what you're sipping, and let's go.
That was a lot right there, wasn't it, Betty?
That was a lot. And I love some of that when we're talking about research integrity on a pre-award side. Is there any overlap? We're checking on all of that. When we're talking about compliance, we're also looking at conflict of interest, right? Is there institutional conflict of interest needed? Of course, we know about financial conflict of interest. So we've got a lot of moving parts here. So let's go back to the basics. Let's talk about sponsors. How are they the same and how are they different? So when it comes to pre-award, there is going to be some type of funding announcement from any of our sponsors, whether it's an official RFP FOA, whether it's an email invite, whether it's through your research office, central office at your university sending out links. If you think about the TOC guide for NIH, PIs are getting all types of funding announcements. And also, if we think about industry, sometimes those funding announcements are on a cocktail napkin in a bar because they met, right? So there's some type of funding announcement that drives these proposals. And sometimes I will add, those funding announcements are a PI gets a personal invite. Hey, we liked your research for this. We have some extra funds. Send us a pre-award, send us a white paper on this, and let's see where we can go. Along with those funding announcements, there is going to be some definition of how to submit. There's going to be some type of guidelines. If we think about some of our smaller non-federals, sometimes those guidelines are just send us a budget and what you're going to do with it. And with our federal awards, as we know, those guidelines can be 20 pages long, 100 pages long. There's always a deadline. Sometimes they're rolling deadlines, as NSF does. Not all NSF, but some. But there's always some ticking clock that we need to adhere by, including our university's ticking clock. Here at Duke, we have 5 business days to get it to our central office. There could be, and especially when it's more federal driven, terms and conditions at that pre-award phase, we're always going to need to drill down on those. Like Lorrie said, those terms and conditions could be something that we can't, as an institution, adhere to, or it could drive how we set up our budgets, such as NSF typically frowns upon foreign travel or foreign collaboration. So you've got to drill down on every link. Don't leave a stone unturned. And most have various types of granting programs. So if you think about with our federal sponsors, it depends on what division of NIH, what division of NSF. Are they collaborating, NSF and Simons? So there's some type of granting program that we have to become familiar with. I know it sounds like you need to take a deep breath, right? There's a lot going on here.
We showed how those sponsors can be the same in many, many ways. But now how can they be different? They're all going to have a funding announcement or some type of funding announcement, but the language in the funding announcement can be different. So if you learn to read a funding announcement, it shouldn't scare you. The only difference may be the language. The submission guidelines, the language of the submission guidelines, they're all going to have some type of submission guidelines. If you can read that, you're going to know how to submit it. So the language may be a little bit different. The submission portal may be different, but let's face it, a lot of them are the same. You got to log on, the components are there, you got to upload the pieces, and then you route it for submission. So the portal shouldn't scare you, even though the portal might be a little bit different. The area research focus, right? They're all going to have the special types of research. NIH, Simons, a lot of your foundations have different branches where the research focus is different, but that shouldn't scare you whether they're doing biological sciences or whether they're doing cancer research. The process is the same.
So when I first stepped into or tripped into, as you did back in the day, research administration, I got hired at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, which is a much lighter blue than I wear these days. And I was hired as an accounting person, which handled sponsored funds. And as you can imagine, in the Department of Biochemistry and Biophysics, our sponsors were 95% federal. I had never seen FOA. I had never drilled down into what was becoming ERA Commons back then. And so I was just like, my head was spinning. So if we think about federal sponsors, let's talk about a few of those. Look at the diversity of federal sponsors. So with the Health and Human Services, you've got the CDC, who works on the federal fiscal year. You've got the NIH. You've got HRSA and SAMHSA. And then you have NSF, who in many ways is a lot like NIH. Then you bring in the Department of Defense. You've got DARPA. You've got ONR. You've got AMC. And those are primarily governed by FAR and not by uniform guidance. So your head is now really rocking. It's like, what? DOE is its own entity, and we could go on and on, yeah, especially with NASA.
And so, right. And so the point here is we're looking at that and we're getting completely overwhelmed. And by the way, NIH is not an entity all its own, people. People think, oh, NIH is an entity all its own. It's DHHS. But we look at that list and Betty starts talking about each federal entity, and that could be overwhelming. But our point to all this is, are they really that different? Not really. Let's talk about how they are the same, okay? They're all governed, all of them, by federal rules and regulations, either uniform guidance, either FAR, or both, depending on the mechanism. There is a leveling at the government level to make them all the same on what the requirements are under the funding announcement, and we're going to attempt to show you that. So the list in itself, and we see this a lot, especially when we're hiring grants and contracts administrators or financial analysts, well, they don't have NIH experience. No, but they've got federal experience, right? So if we pick that apart, you can learn the agency, but they've got federal experience. So there is a leveling by the federal government under the rules and regulations on all of those sponsors. And they all have the same requirements in their funding announcement, all of them. And we're going to show you what we mean. But they all have the same requirements somehow, some way in those funding announcements. They all have the same required information in their notice of awards. The terms and conditions might be a little bit different, but the information that they have to provide is all the same. They all have the same required information in their terms and conditions. Again, the terms and conditions could be different, but they have to provide the same level of information. So any one of you right now could pick up any one of those sponsors knowing that and be able to work them.
So let's go.
But you better, you're up.
I'm up. Let's talk about some of the differences. The research areas, we've touched on this. It depends on what area of NIH, what area. And by that, like Lorrie was talking about, is it cancer? Of course, nowadays, is it COVID? What is the research entity? What are they drilling into? The requirements for the submissions can be very different. And I'm going to use a pretty basic example here, and that is submitting a grant to the NIH is very different than submitting a contract to the NIH. And oh, by the way, yes, a lot of our larger sponsors will send a call for a proposal for different funding mechanisms: DOE, grant, cooperative agreement; NIH, grant, contract, cooperative agreement. So the submissions can be different, the requirements. How they are managed on the post-award side are certainly very unique to that funding mechanism, to the submission, to the proposal, based on what the research is, based on, do we draw down funds from most of our larger federal, or do we have to invoice in the fact of a contract with the federal? So award management can be different. That's based on terms and conditions. And the layout of the notice of awards can be very different. And if you've ever gone to one of our basics of research presentations where we look at different notices of awards, a federal sponsor sends a pretty detailed notice of award. Mellon Foundation sends a letter: congrats, here's your check. So these are some of the basic differences in our sponsors.
So the layout, and one of the things that comes to mind is when you get an NIH notice of award compared to a DOD notice of award, the layout's different. And when you look at that, it can be overwhelming. But when you pick it apart, and if you understand that the information contained in it is the same, and it's required by the federal government to have that information in there, it's just the layout is different, won't be as overwhelming. And so we touched on federal and how they're different and the same. So let's look at non-federal. And so, we've got our state and local agencies, and we know that funding can be flowed down from federal. So we have to be very mindful of the terms. So sometimes we're going into uncharted waters there, and it's not so clear. We have our nonprofit or not-for-profit, and so we label those as charities, foundations, educational institutions. And when we're in this world, we can live, these foundations and charities and educational institutions can live in a world all their own. And so interpreting can be a little hard. For profit, it's a whole new world. It's a world you are entering into a whole new world. Oh, and then we've got international. And we are stepping on uneven ground, and we might even hit a landmine every now and then. So we have to be very careful when we get into that non-federal, okay? And we're going to show why. And so Betty's going to lay out some of the same things in the non-federal.
So some similarities are even though they're all unique, all different, they are governed by some type of rules, regulations, and policies, and it's unique to them and unique to their entity, and whether or not, as Lorrie said, is it a flow through of any type. They are all going to have their own set of regulations. They might have some that are a pass through from the prime entity, but they will have an internal set of rules and regulations, terms and conditions. And how are they different? Most non-federal sponsor agencies, and as Lorrie mentioned earlier, with the exception of state and local, will have their own set, and they can be very, very unique. And I know that all sort of sounds very intertwined, and it is. It just depends. We have some non-federal sponsors that are just giving types of fellowships to our students. And it could be that we don't allow fringe, we don't allow indirects. It also could be based on deliverables that they set. So there is their own, we have to drill down. Sometimes you'll have to drill down into their websites or find contacts there that can help define exactly how we propose and then manage.
So one of the things is there isn't a lot on this page for non-federal, because there's a lot left up to interpretation on non-federal, where we can go back and look at the federal and say there's a lot more on that page. And I know for the people who like structure is probably going to like federal sponsors better than non-federal, because there's a lot of vagueness when we get into the non-federal. And that's that many shades of gray. So there's a lot of shades of gray when we get into our non-federal sponsors. So let's look at our funding announcement, and let's look how they're a little bit different. And so we can all agree that a program announcement or a parent announcement is a little bit different than a program solicitation, right? NSF seems to use solicitation a lot, and some of our other sponsors. Request for application is very different. They're all a little bit different in what they're asking for, what they're requiring, and the different mechanisms, right? The request for proposal. But how are the same? How are all of these the same? Usually all issued by a federal sponsoring agency, okay? And so the same thing applies that we just talked about. They are governed by the feds. But are they really all that different? Are all of these ones up top really all that different?
So what I really like is how Lorrie did the segue of governing, how they're governed. So with federal sponsors, we are either going to be governed by uniform guidance or federal acquisition regulations, which a lot of times I will refer to as the dreaded FAR. So whether it's a grant, and we talked about this earlier also, regardless of being a grant, a cooperative agreement, or a contract, federal law establishes the information that we must abide by and we must have in our proposals for their specific funding announcements. And these regulations don't tell you, it's not like a checklist, right? Where it goes, you will put this, you will put this, you will put this. It's not going to tell you how to arrange it. It's just telling you what has to be, what information must be contained in the proposal for the specific funding announcement.
And so under uniform guidance and FAR, the common thing here is that FAR and uniform guidance dictates what has to be contained in the funding announcement, and the information that has to be in the funding announcement. They don't tell you how it has to be arranged on the pages, but they tell you what has to be in those funding announcements. And so let's look at uniform guidance and let's break out some of that information that it says must be in that funding announcement. And if you understand where that comes from, I always say, if you understand the whys, you understand the hows, right? So we're going to talk about the why here of a funding announcement. And so it's under uniform guidance. I'm going to focus on uniform guidance for a second. And 2 CFR 200, we know that's uniform guidance, but in subpart C, and that's a forgotten subpart because we're always focused on subpart E, right? And so subpart C 200.204 specifically talks about funding announcements and what has to be in there from the federal perspective. So if you pick up any funding announcement from a federal sponsor, you're going to get the same information, just maybe laid out a little differently. So here, let's look at solicitation or the funding opportunity number. These are the things that are going to be in there. There's no dancing around it. You will find it there. The funding opportunity title, the summary of the program requirements, including the PI qualifications, if there is any. Sometimes it's vague and says, follow your institution, right? The purpose of the funding opportunity. For us, if we see the purpose is something different than what they normally adhere to, the PI submits under, then we want to question. But the point here is that uniform guidance says it's going to be there. The key dates, including the due dates, they have to list that. It won't be vague. Okay, application instructions, they have to tell you how to apply. The description of the funding opportunity. And the instrument, is it a grant, a cooperative agreement, a contract? They have to tell you that at the funding announcement stage. What are you applying to? What is that funding opportunity announcement having you apply for? A grant, a cooperative agreement, or a contract? And all of these other things, every single one of these has to be there. We're just not picking apart and reading it. It all must be contained in a federal funding announcement. So wait, there's more? Yeah, there's more. And here are the other things. They have to tell you the authority and regulations it falls under. Does it fall under FAR? Does it fall under uniform guidance? The agency contacts in case you have a question. Award administration information. A lot of the funding agencies are putting links, and that's why the funding announcement are not as thick as they used to be. They're just putting links, and it's our responsibility to go out at that stage. But all of this stuff has to be in a federal funding announcement. And then, of course, they have to tell you up front if there's any organizational or institutional conflict of interest required at the pre-award phase, and you can't miss that either. All of those things is the requirement under uniform guidance, and you'll find it out in FAR too, if it is a federal funding announcement. So you shouldn't be so scared. It's all there. Oh, sorry, Betty. It is all there. You just have to pick it apart. So whether it's a DOD, an NIH, a DOE, it is all going to be there. It's just a matter of your review process.
And so for the non-federal funding announcements, what you're going to find are a lot of different looks, but they are going to have so many similarities. So the difference is their individual policies. With federal, Lorrie just talked about that it's going to follow uniform guidance / FAR. So you're going to have those items, might not be in the same place, but you're going to have it. Here, it's going to be, what does Mellon Foundation require? What does Robert Wood Johnson Foundation require? What does NCC grant for a fellowship for a student require? It's going to go by their own policies. Similarities are a lot of larger, more defined non-federal entities are trying to follow that federal guideline, most particularly in the past few years. You'll see a little more structure to them. But are they really all that different? So really, if we're looking at it from an overview, are they all that different? all of them have some type of submission guidelines. They're going to tell you what they're looking for as far as the research goes. You're going to get a deadline. Sometimes it's just, as Lorrie said, it's in that shade of gray. I like to say swimming in the gray. And sometimes it's just, here you go. I'm going to give you this. And this is what I want. Tell me when you can do it. So it can be anywhere from very structured to not, but there is the same information overall.
We just had this conversation this morning in a management meeting, and we were talking about some coaching issues, and it just happened to be on a non-federal sponsor. And if you're in the academic world, so we're taking non-school of med in the academic research arena, it may not fall under research, right? They're getting all kinds of different public service awards, teaching awards, and it doesn't always fit into the way we would think about submitting a regular award, right? So the justification might look a little different and the language might look a little different. That is what we run into with our non-federal sponsors. Sometimes there is that left up to interpretation, but the point to all this, if you have your process for pre-award, you should be able to work your way through that gray or swim through the gray, right? So Betty's going to touch on some what we like to call best approaches to pre-award.
So Lorrie and I have this conversation. It's been going on for years. And it's, you know, there is no big binded manual for research administration. Wouldn't it be glorious if there was? Wouldn't it be glorious if there were checklists and SOPs that had every single thing you ever needed, so you didn't have to critically think? It's not the world that we have chosen to work in. So there is no one place. You've got to dig in to, yes, Miss Jones, that would be fantastic if we had a big manual. But you've got to dig down. It's our job to do the due diligence. And it's our job to read through these funding announcements and read through about our sponsors and work with our PIs and keep yourself some notes and some checklists and share it with everybody you work with and all of us too.
So go ahead, Betty. So you're up.
I know, I just go, there you go, thanks, sorry.
Okay.
So one of the things over the years and years of, I can speak for Lorrie on this also, that we found is most particularly those of us who started in a post-award position, you very quickly try to understand that if you don't know what was proposed, how in the world can you manage it? We can't manage what we don't see, right? So establish pre-award procedures that work for what your university's rules and regulations are, the unit that you're working with, get to know your PIs, and if you are not life cycle, establish those kickoff, those handoff meetings when your proposals get awarded so that everybody understands what this award's about and what is being dictated. We can't speak about communication enough. Communicate openly, communicate proactively. The next bullet will say just doing that. Start your process early. When I train my new employees, when they come in the door, or if I have inherited a team that had existing employees, what I say to them is the first question out of my mouth when I meet with my PIs every month for their reconciliation financial status statements. My first question isn't, how are you? It's, what proposals do you have coming up? And then I try to learn their portfolio enough to say, okay, this PI is primarily NIH driven. What are the NIH deadlines? Oh, this PI's research is about cancer in NIH. Okay, so I got on the NIH quick TOC listserv, which gives funding announcements coming out. I might see something coming up. I would ask her.
I just stopped for a second. Betty does ask how you're doing.
Yeah.
Someone asked who should facilitate the kickoff meeting, and is a pre-award, post-award, or some type of mix in between. If your organization, or I'd say at the department level, is split out pre and post, it is a joint meeting. It is pre-award attending and post-award attending and the PI attending, and maybe the lab people or whoever the PI wants to be involved, the program people. So there's multiple people. And that should be a process that is established and communicated on when that award comes in. Whoever gets that award, if it's pre-award gets that award coming in, then they organize the kickoff meeting. If it's post-award getting the award coming in, then that's kickoff. But that's a process that needs to be established internally on best practice.
And also, Lori, while we're in the chat, our slides will be made public to you, to all of you. So no worries there. You'll be able to get these slides. And the other thing is, Matilda had a good question back, and it was, she's not clear on how pre-award helps the PI get the science done. In her mind, they help state the science. Can we elaborate? And what I will say about that is, when you're building your proposals, and I have an example for you, I have a very large DOE proposal that has gone in, and it's about to be awarded. We know that it's going to be awarded. When you're looking at what the PI is proposing, and Lori, jump in with any other example, are they proposing enough effort? Are they proposing enough supplies to get what the aims are? And you would have to talk to your PI to understand what they're trying to do. Like in phase 1, what are they trying to do? Okay, did we put in enough effort? Did we put in tuition for the student? That's how I approach it. It's, am I getting enough budget? Am I getting enough of what the deliverable is from the funding announcement that they can meet those requirements to get their science done?
Yeah, so Robin just put up in the chat that she hears all the time, that's not me, I'm pre-award. Here's the deal. We are all equals responsible, whether we're pre-award or post-award. We're doing a session on internal controls later this week, I think, where we talk about that it's everybody's responsibility at the institution level for internal controls. So if pre-award is not thinking post-award and post-award is not thinking pre-award, there's a gap somewhere. And so that's why best approach is pre and post have to get on the same page and make friends and play nice in the sandbox and stop thinking as separate processes. And so, Betty, I think to your point with this getting the science done, I think I have a bullet point coming up here that kind of talks about that. And so one of the best approaches too is make sure you click on those links. Again, those funding announcements, those sponsors are putting links in now to terms and conditions. And if it is your responsibility to click on those links to understand what you're certifying when that proposal goes in. And we have to know that. And the common theme here from these best approaches that Betty talked about on the previous page and what I'm talking about now, it's you, it's us, is we. These are our best approaches and not waiting for other people. So build yourself a timeline with roles and responsibilities for you and your PI. That's your process. That is something that you can control. And so this is your responsibility. This is my responsibility. This is the timeline that we should be focusing on to get this done. What internal approvals will we need up front? And that's something we need to think about that. Are we submitting late? Do we need to get a waiver according to your institution's policy? Do we need an F&A waiver? Are they asking for something different than the university charges? Is there cost sharing? Is there a process for that? That is right up front to get those approvals and not waiting to the last day before it's due to get that. Anticipation. And that's one of the big things about being proactive. It's anticipating where we think those problems will surface, where at the university level those problems are going to surface, where in the submission process are they going to surface. And if we're building our timeline and frequently communicating, right, that's a win-win between pre and post. We're anticipating all this on the front end. Establish early who the players are. Are we going to have subawards? Are we going to have internal co-PIs or co-Is? Who are the players? And I can take that in a proactive approach and anticipate where the holdup is going to be in that timeline and roles and responsibilities. Here's what we talked about with the science and your PI. Okay, we cannot do the science for them. Okay, we don't know, and we're not scientists. However, if we get our PI to focus on the front end, as soon as they say that they're going to submit, to help get that budget done, the abstract, and so then when all those administrative pieces are focused on the front end, they've got more time for their science. Okay, we do know there's science. We have an idea when that abstract comes in, and if that proposal comes in looking a little different and we've already prepared that budget, it's not matching up, we might need to tweak it a little bit. But if we wait to get our administrative pieces done to the end and allow them to focus on their science first, we are pushed into a corner. We are the ones at the very last minute. Yes, it is very difficult depending on the PI, okay, but it is the constant. Here, I need this. Here, I need this. Now, a lot of us are remote. We used to be able to go show up in their office, and we can't quite do that anymore without driving there. Some PIs are just not going to comply, and you were absolutely right. We do the best we can. But the more best approaches that we use in our process, the more that we can control. Some PIs are never going to change. But I've been doing this for a while, and I'd say 95% of the PIs I've been able to shift their focus just by managing, just by having my own internal timeline, my own roles and responsibilities, and making it very clear on the front end and communicating early what the expectation is. And you'll get a lot of them turned around. Some of them you just won't. And no matter how hard you try, you just know that that one that's submitting, you're going to be pushed into a corner. Welcome to pre-award, right?
Okay, so a few notes just to have in the corner of your mind. You know, do we need any kind of prior approval for a submission? You know, maybe it's exceeding the salary cap. Is there been, if this is a resubmission, don't just assume that it's going to go by the last funding announcement that came out. There could have been some updates, so don't neglect to check for those. Is the PI responding to the right funding mechanism? Is there research in the ocean and they're responding to something that's cancer related in urban? You know, make sure that, because funding announcements can change numbers, or you need to drill down just to make sure. And, you know, are they responding in a timely manner? Are they responding in a manner in which we don't need any kind of pre-approval from our institution for them to do it? And also, as we said about NSF, is there any foreign aspects in the funding announcement that would not, or excuse me, any foreign aspects in the proposal by the PI that would not be allowed by that particular funder?
So what we're going by now is if you've created yourself a submission guide, and I like to call them guides because not everything's going to be in there. So the last couple bullet points that we've been talking about are when you do create your guides, to remind yourself about these things. And compliance to the funding announcement is huge. If we're not complying to the funding announcement, chances are when we submit that proposal, you have a good chance of it being kicked out. And we don't want to be the one responsible for that. Some of the common mistakes to keep in mind that we as research administration professionals tend to overlook is the budget. And did we put in there unallowable costs? And is everything that we're putting in there allowable? Formatting of the proposal. This is huge. And it some people have the mindset of that's the PI's responsibility. Well, this is where I get into being not a dinosaur, but a seasoned, that I feel that it is my responsibility to make sure the formatting is correct, that they're using the right font, and they're adhering to the margins. And every conference that we go to, particularly NSF, where Gene Feldman talks about, they get the ruler out and actually measure that page to make sure that they're adhering to the right margins, because a lot of the PIs decided they were going to use the European format, which gives them a little bit more space on the page, but doesn't adhere to the line specifications. So I would hate to think that my PI got that kicked out because I didn't check for that. Application pieces are missing. That is ultimately our responsibility. We're signing off on that. Our institution is signing off that. I don't feel right saying to my central office, that's your responsibility, not mine, when I am the grant manager responsible for that PI. So to me, that's my best approach. Overall compliance to the funding announcements. Use the same approach when you're approaching the submission portals, right? They're all just a little bit different, but you're logging on, you're uploading pieces. The guidelines are going to be there. Usually they come with some kind of instruction guide. Don't be afraid of those, okay? Just read and comply. That's a big thing. Reading is the biggest thing.
So this is a great slide, and I give all of the kudos to Lorrie for finding this slide. But here's the bottom line. I like to say that we are air traffic controllers, right? We're juggling a lot of things at the same time, most particularly if we're life cycle. Stress equals or can cause or will cause all of these other things. So let's talk about some things that we can do.
So here are the common stressors in pre-award. And it's not necessarily because it's a federal sponsor or it's a non-federal sponsor or it's this portal. It's the stress of pre-award, right? These are the things that can cause the stress. Insufficient lead time, right? Oh, it's due at 5 o'clock today and I forgot to tell you. The stress level, my blood pressure goes out the roof. Insufficient information. Oh, I'm submitting to this sponsor and that's all you get, right? Missing documentation, vague institutional policies. Okay, there are institutions out there that do not have SOPs and do not have clear guidelines, undefined business practices or process. And that's really us from the departmental perspective. What is our business process? What is our individual process? Have we defined it? If we don't have a defined process, that's stress right there, okay? And we're on the back end, not the front end of it. Completeness of training. Don't wait for your institution to train you. Go out and find your training, whether it be a mentor, whether it be at NCURA or FRAC or SRA. You've got to find your training. Don't wait for your institution to train you. I often hear, well, I wasn't trained. Well, why are you not training yourself? Okay, we've got to be a little proactive with our own training. And our undeveloped soft skills, it is not just about the hard skills. It is about soft skills. It is about critical thinking and our time management and our people skills and our communication. That all comes with it. If we're only focusing on the hard skills and not the soft skills, we will be stressed.
So we've touched on this throughout all the slides, and our time is running a little bit short. So as Lorrie and I have said over and over, practice makes perfect. Find a mentor, get your resources. You're sitting with 320 of them right now. Reach out to Lorrie and I. Like Lorrie said, do some training on your own. There's plenty out there. And if you're not sure where to look, use your resources. And yeah, there is no big manual. I promise you there isn't one, because it changes every day. But make your own resources, make your own manual, make your own cheat sheet, sticky notes, whatever it is that works for you.
And don't wait for your institution policies to become more defined and clear, okay? You might have to develop your own internal process without going, without stepping on your institution's policy. You might have to define your process a little better. Attend meetings in shadow. There's nothing magic to pre-award. I can tell you that. There's nothing magic to it. It is learning the fundamental soft and hard skills needed, okay? And no matter how big and bad you get with yourself, no matter how experienced you are, never forget your basics. It is all about the basics. So when someone now says, hopefully we've given you some tools that when somebody says pre-award, you don't do this, that you're running as fast and far away as you possibly can. So you can do pre-award. All you need is a clear understanding of the hows and the whys of the process. Betty?
If you have that, if you have the HWP, you can do it regardless of your sponsor, the funding mechanism, or the submission portal.
And that is our presentation. So now I know that you can all go do pre-award.
That's right. We are just thrilled to be with all of you again. Any of those that are new to FRAC, hope that you will continue to be a part of this unbelievable conference, and make your resources here. As it's been said, the slides presentation is going to be available. Absolutely do take care, stay safe, and we look forward to seeing you maybe soon in person.